everybody, welcome back to the RFL podcast. We are in the off season. We've almost got over the edge into the pre-season now. We are just days away from seeing how our players perform in training camp and then seeing how they actually perform on the field. But before we get to that, we need to backtrack on this podcast. We've been out of the game for a couple of weeks and, well, there's been a draft. There's been a bunch of free agency moves happening and, of course, trades to go along with all of that. And to try and break that down, Wobbegong, as always, is back. I mean, Wobbegong, how's your off-season gone so far?
Very exciting to see great talent to go to the teams that did not have a good season last year. So very excited to see some of those top 10 picks on the field next off-season. We will have some new top teams. So very exciting off-season throughout trades, free agency, and of course the highlight of the off-season, the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to sort of try and break down the draft today, as everyone can kind of see on the screen. We're going to talk a little bit about the top 10 picks and what happened there and our views on that. We're then going to sort of go through sort of rounds 1 to 3 and talk about probably our favourite pick and our least favourite pick. And that'll kind of round us out today, really, and any other observations we have on the draft itself. So tune in for that for today. Those of you who are desperately waiting for look at free agency, look at how teams are stacking up, who's going to be the contender, who could possibly knock the Saints off the pedestal this year. That will be back in 2 episodes, and we'll do an NFC preview and an AFC preview, and we'll try to break down some of that in the episodes coming probably next week, we think. But stay tuned for those ones coming up. But that means we have to go back and talk a little bit about the draft. And well, where best to start Wobbegong than with the number 1 pick, the Kansas City Chiefs, selecting Steve Young, the guy we kind of, before scouting, said that he looked absolutely phenomenal on the ratings. What's your impressions of him so far?
He looks really, really good. Best player in the draft. I think he will be a very, very good quarterback. Will be exciting to see what the Kansas City Chiefs will do with him. They also drafted another O-liner in the first round after picking one in the first round last year. So Steve Young can have a really, really good O-line for the season. I think he will be one of the most exciting prospects and maybe gives the Chiefs the edge to maybe already challenge the Raiders for the division title this season. But yeah, he should be incredible and the number 1 favorite for Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when we looked at his player card, for those of you who watched the episode and looked back, he had all A's basically, and this was obviously before scouting, before we'd done any analysis of him. And well, I mean, he's turned out on the player card to be exceptional. He's strong in pretty much every area you would want for a quarterback. Got really, really good speed, so he's going to be a really, really dynamic player for this team, I think, and for the Chiefs. I'm interested to see. I think that's a really good observation, Wobbegong, as to whether they can sort of go from being bottom of their division to the top. It's going to be fascinating to see. But for those of you who know, he's got some really great flags as well. So he's got dual threat gunslinger, clutch QB, and obviously first overall pick. So he's going to be this dual guy who can pretty much do anything quarterback. And yeah, I think it'd be very hard for anyone to knock him off of being Rookie of the Year based on his ratings and what we kind of perceive his performance going to be. So no surprises by the Chiefs, I think, in taking Steve Young as number 1. We'll talk about more the Chiefs when it becomes sort of the season previews next week. But yeah, if you got number 1 pick, you take the best player available, and if it's the best quarterback available, fantastic. And we'll be interested to see how the Chiefs kind of round out from there. But we move on to sort of the second pick, which was Reggie White to the Bears. Your reflections on Reggie White going into the Bears, team that's been sort of, well, it had a lot of change recently with personnel, on the roster. Good start in terms of getting them back to where they should be.
I like this pick, and I remember when we talked about the top 10 picks, we thought the Bears could take a quarterback, but I also said, well, maybe they should go with what we all thought was the second best player in the draft with Reggie White. I think it's very nice to see that they're planning a long-term rebuild. They had 4 first-round picks this season, so they can build around that and maybe draft a quarterback next year. Let's see, they also have 2 additional first-rounders next year, so a lot of draft ammunition to build their team. And Reggie White should be one of the key pieces on defense for the years to come. So I really, really liked this pick, going edge, going the best defensive player in the draft here at pick number 2. And so far, really impressive to see if the Bears are able to get a defensive turnaround next season with their young players.
Yeah, and it is a position where the league is starting to get starved of really, really good top tier talent. In particular, as some of the older veterans start to retire and start to sort of lose their prestige at the top, I think. So Reggie White, number 2 pick, is a nail on fantastic option for the Bears. He's good in pretty much every area you'd want from a defensive edge, and I'm be really excited to see how he does. We saw with I believe it was the Jets last year. If you get a good edge name, good setup, you can cause absolute havoc. So be really excited to see how Reggie White does. And I think, as you said, I think it was probably the right pick. I think if they would have gone quarterback, and we'll talk about the other quarterback options as we go down this, maybe it wasn't the right time for that. So starting to build out that defensive set with an absolute premier edge player is a really, really good start for them. Then that moves us down to sort of the Dallas Cowboys, who picked up Carl Banks. Dallas have gone through this interesting transition off the field with Palm sort of not there then back. So good to see him back. Hoping that he can continue the Cowboys' momentum in terms of being one of those premier teams in the league. But a nice little pickup in Carl Banks for a team that, let's be frank, doesn't necessarily need a huge amount of talent.
Yeah, I also thought about what I would do as the Cowboys. Maybe trade down could have been an option, especially when you see that the Buccaneers were interested in trading up and did so one pick after. Also, I heard that the Bears were interested in trading up for Boomer Esiason. So maybe if Palm had been there would have been an option to trade down, get more picks for the future, because the Cowboys are getting older. And on hindsight, picking Gary Zimmerman would have been the better option. We will talk about that pick in a second. Carl Banks definitely looks solid. But I think for the Cowboys, better options would have been a trade down or the tackle pick.
Yeah, I think Carl Banks is going to be a good linebacker. I think we'll talk about some of the other options that were available, and maybe the in and out of the GM sort of there and not there and coming back. Maybe played a little bit of a hand, and I think if Palm had been there, he may have done something slightly different. But that brings us to sort of the next quarterback off the block, which was it was a trade to begin with. Let's talk a little bit about that. So, of course, the Jets held the 4th pick in the draft, and they made a move quite early on to sort of trade down essentially. So they moved the 4th pick to Tampa in exchange for the 10th pick, the 25th pick, and a 3rd round pick. We're obviously going to catch sort of the 10th pick as part of this. But, it meant that they drafted down. They obviously didn't feel the need to bring in Boomer. I can't say Wobbegong. I'm just going Boomer. You couldn't draft Boomer. So we'll talk a little bit about who they were targeting. And for obvious reasons, the Jets didn't need a quarterback. But it meant that Tampa could sneak in here and pick Boomer up, who looks like a really, really solid quarterback. From the beginning. He's a guy, Wobbegong, that we knew nothing about. We obviously know about him now. What's your reflections on the trade and Boomer coming into the league?
I love the trade for both teams. In the podcast before the draft, we talked about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers being one team with all the draft ammunition. They had 3 first-round picks, if I remember correctly, to maybe look to trade up for Boomer Esiason, since the Buccaneers do not have a quarterback on the roster who should be a starter. So getting Boomer was definitely a really, really good move. They paid pick 10 and pick 25 as well as a 3rd round pick. And I also like the move for the Jets. Of course, they could have picked the tackle, and maybe they regret their decision a little bit because tackle was a need for them. But they get the best corner in the draft at 10, and also one of the better defensive tackles at 25. And defensive tackles is a position in the draft where the talent is really scarce. So 3 good ones in the 1st round, and after that, a big talent drop off. So good move for the Jets to get two defensive playmakers by trading down. I think the trade definitely makes sense for both teams. And I really, really like talent of Boomer Esiason for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, absolutely, and he does have the tag game manager as well, so that's certainly going to help him in terms of his projection going into sort of the RFL. Let's jump to pick number 10 then quickly and talk about that, because I think it's worth in context of here. So obviously the Jets did trade down. They picked up Eugene Daniel, who is a phenomenal cornerback in a position where there are, again, weakening sort of skill sets available in the cornerback market now. You obviously mentioned that he is a premier sort of cornerback going into the league. I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if the Jets trade down and then basically bring in two defensive stalwarts. That's pretty much how they've been playing out. And with O'Brien on the offensive end, making the defense even stronger is only going to bring this team back up into sort of the projection of status going into the season. I mean, yeah, there's nothing not to like about Eugene Daniel, is there, Wobbegong?
So I think especially his agility and speed, 87 and 84 is awesome. As a rookie, he should really make an impact. Also 94 player skill on cornerback, awesome work ethic, and the shutdown corner trade. So he should immediately be a top tackle for the Jets. And when you look at the roster, cornerback was definitely one need. They, of course, have Lester Hayes, one of the best corners in the league. But now getting a true lockdown corner, number 2, especially in this division, when you look at the last year rookie quarterbacks that the Colts and the Dolphins have, especially the great passing attack also by the Patriots, I think, especially in this division, it's really important to shut down the passing game. So great move by the Jets. I love Eugene Daniel. He should be a quality starter from day one.
Yeah, when he has that shutdown corner flag and trait that everyone kind of looks for in those back positions. So we jump a little bit back to the guy we've been sort of talking quite heavily about, Gary Zimmerman, who I think, to be fair, well, we're going on reflection, probably should have gone in the top 3, given his ability.
Oh yeah,
phenomenal tackle. Probably one of the best we've seen in several drafts now, I think. End up going to the Falcons. They're probably sitting there absolutely delighted that they managed to pick him up, given everything else that's happened above them in the draft. Yeah, I mean, look, he's already one of the best in the league, isn't he, coming out as a rookie?
He is, and I mean, we talked about Steve Young as the best player in the draft because of positional value, but getting Zimmerman, I think for the next 10 to 15 years, the Falcons do not need to worry about their franchise left tackle. He has incredible strength, awesome run blocking, also already very good pass blocker. I mean, it's never sexy to draft an O-liner, but in this case, it might be. He's really one of the best tackles. Young, good size, good weight. Yeah, plug and play as starter and star on the O-line and helps the Falcons to build a good foundation and a solid O-line. And yeah, especially when you have the Saints in your division, I think it's important to beef up on O-line and getting stronger and getting the best player there. Yeah, best pick of the draft. On pick number 5, I talked about that the Cowboys should have picked him on hindsight, of course, but he is incredible. No way around that.
No, I completely agree. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see how Ron Jaworski kind of does this year. He was in and out of the lineup last year. Still a very, very good quarterback, and I think it'll be interesting how his actual performance stacks up with the addition to him and Zimmerman at left tackle. Whether that gives him that bit of protection that's desperately needed by the Falcons. So yeah, fantastic pickup, excellent work by the Falcons to bring him in. That brings us to the 6th pick, which was Eric Williams, the next edge player off the board, going off to Seattle. Yeah, solid edge pick from what I can kind of gather from the draft. Kind of Seattle needing a whole bunch of players. They're going for a big rebuild. Again, similar to the Bears, I think we've gone good start in terms of picking him up.
Yeah, for sure. And he was much closer to Reggie White than I thought he would be. So awesome pickup. He should be your number one edge player. And yeah, the Seahawks are in a rebuild. They had multiple first round picks. I think they had 3. So very interesting to see that 2 picks on defense, 1 on offense, but that should be your plug and play starter as an edge rusher, and definitely much needed help for the Seattle Seahawks. Getting younger and getting a star edge player, definitely a really good pick.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings us down to the first receiver of the board, which was to the Denver Broncos, taking Irving Fryer. Your thoughts in terms of how he stacks up against maybe some of the receivers already in the league?
Yeah, I think that was maybe one of the first surprises in terms of value. He was projected to be a second-round pick, and Louis Lips, who went at pick 13, again to the Falcons, who had a really, really good draft. He was projected to go top 10 or first round or something like that. So the odds would have been Lips number 1 wide receiver. But I think Irving Fryer, that was definitely a good pickup. 83 speed. If I remember correctly, he's the fastest receiver in the draft. And yeah, of course, a good combination. So no real weaknesses in agility, hands, and speed. So maybe with another training camp to bump up one of these values, he should be a very good playmaker for the Broncos, and excited to see what he can do for them. So I like this pick. Of course, surprising, but yeah, the Broncos had a really good scout and drafted what looks like one of the better receivers here in this draft.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it was a good bit of scouting to kind of bring him in at 7. I think when we talk about some of the other receiver options, my view is that I think some of them will need to grow a little bit to kind of stack themselves up against the rest of the league in terms of that position set. But, it's always tough to get good elite receivers. They're always paid a huge amount. And as proven by the Saints and yourselves over the past 2 seasons, even the Patriots this year, if you have 2 or 3 very good receiving options with a quarterback, it can really elevate the game of your offense for obvious reasons. So, means that draft time, those sort of slots and sort of skill positions are incredibly valuable. So when we move on to sort of the pick 1-8, which was Sean Jones, who went to the Washington. Washington had a really surprising season last year, I have to say. I think they were, had a really fantastic draft last year, really elevated the team back up and started to show real signs of promise. So adding a defensive edge player, I think, is going to stand them in good stead. Similar to what you sort of said a minute ago, I think he's, in terms of the drop off of the edge positions in this top 10, not much really here. So I think in terms of snagging him at 8, in a position where the Redskins are probably looking to kind of build further this year, I think is a really, really good value option for them.
Yeah, and when you look at the roster, everyone should have known that the Redskins hopefully were planning to go edge as their number 1 priority. He is now the best edge player on their team, young, and what I really, really like about Sean Jones, he is 6'7". So I think as a speed rusher, also good speed, 74 speed, and with that size, it could be a really, really interesting player, especially in the toughest division in our league. Beefing up the O and D line, everyone should know that. I really, really like that. So great pickup for the Redskins to build their defense, which was really important when you look at last season. Get better there and get competitive to maybe push for the playoffs again, or also the division title will be interesting to see. But yeah, good pickup.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, man, when we talk about the NFC East on that previous show, we're going to struggle with that one again, just given with this pick as well. Let's move on to sort of the final pick of the top 10 that we haven't talked about, which was the San Diego Chargers picking up Guy McIntyre, first sort of offensive line guy other than Zimmerman sort of off the board here, going at 9. My reflection is I think they probably could have got a little bit better value than maybe picking him up. But that being said, I think he's going to grow and be a really, really good starter. And probably, again, looking at where the Chargers are in particular, they've obviously already established some of the sort of the core position slots and the offensive skills. And so, therefore, landing a guy where they actually probably did need a piece as pick 9 to kind of slot straight in as a starting position. Makes sense, I think. Yeah, a solid pick, but I think there's probably better players on the board that the Chargers could have maybe taken at 9.
Yeah, I fully agree. So maybe a little bit of a reach, but on the other hand, you do not have to worry about your O-line anymore. When you look at the Chargers, they have incredible players who are all 26 or younger, with one exception on the O-line. But they have a really young O-line, a good O-line, and that should be a good foundation for, Phil Simms, their quarterback, to have a great season again and get those playmakers into the mix. Yeah, I agree. Could have been maybe a better value pick, but yeah, your O line is done, so you do not have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. So that kind of brings us to the end of the top 10. And I think what would be interesting, Wobbegong, now is if we sort of look through rounds 1, 2, and 3 and kind of pick out maybe our favourite pick of the round and then our least favourite pick. And given that I am starting this off, I am going to dive straight in there and talk about my favourite pick of the first round, which was the Steelers. So the Steelers, obviously an ageing team, needed some additional skill positions, some additional sort of young depth to kind of come in. And to take Martin Bayless off the board at pick 20 in the first round, I think was a really, really fantastic option for them. He is a strong safety, but looks like he can probably play linebacker quite well. So he can mix it up. And I like his versatility, but also he's got some really, really good stats. So talking 64 tackle, 79 speed, 83 agility, 56 strength, which means that he can pretty much play those position sets fairly comfortably. I really like that at pick 20. A team that I think needed those versatile guys to kind of slot in around the aging stars that they've got. And I'm really, really excited to see how he does on the Steelers next year.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting pickup because I did not think about the Steelers picking strong safety. They have Glenn Blackwood there, 27 years old, final year of the contract. So maybe that's something where the Steelers look into trading him. I'm not sure what their plan is here. Bayless definitely a value pick, a young player and already one of the better strong safeties in the league. So really interesting to see what they are planning with those two safeties. Maybe Bayless will play free safety. Not sure if he plans to do that. Maybe I would not recommend that given the player skill, but they have some playmakers now in the secondary. So I agree. Great pick. A little bit surprising though.
Yeah, I mean, interesting one on terms of moving into free safety. I think you could probably get away with a training camp, move him over. That might be enough to kind of balance that out. I could honestly see him probably going in at linebacker as well for some plays. And I think that's really interesting to see how that would pan out. He's got some really interesting stats there. So I think they'll play him around multiple positions rather than him just stay in one place. So yeah, I really like that pick. So who did you have for the first round in terms of your sort of favourite pickup?
That is pick 22, New Orleans Saints, Jim Sweeney. And I see here he's now a guard. Not sure if the Saints plan to coach him on guard. He was originally a center and had, I think, 87 overall. Great strength with 80 overall, great pass blocking, and also decent run blocking. And I like that, especially since, he was also high on my board for pick 27. The Saints were on pick 28 and looking to trade up, and not only traded up, but they made a move with the Raiders that got them Marty Lyons as well, and they sent over Mike Butler, so they got better on edge, 3 years younger on edge, paid a second rounder and a third rounder, but also traded up to get Jim Sweeney and Marty Lyons in total. And I like that Sweeney should be a plug and play starter again for the O-line, and I think I've said it a lot today, but O-line matters, and it will be interesting to see if the Saints really plan with him on guard or if he's just their starting center. If he will be a good guard, they need a really good training camp from him. But yeah, definitely a value pick here, getting one of the best O-liners at the end, or rather the end of round 1 with a small trade up.
Yeah, I think he is going to play guard, for being honest with you. I mean, he's not going to dislodge Bostic, is he, in terms of the centre position? Let's be honest. So I think he could be being training camp to be a guard. And given how position skill kind of develops, and let's be perfectly honest with you, the Saints are the champs, so they've got plenty of skill on their side and plenty of ability in this roster to kind of be able to cope with that whilst he develops. So I could well
For
see him
sure.
staying in
Yeah.
his position. Yeah, let's move on to sort of our least favourite picks of the first round, and I'll let you start in terms of which pick do you think was the sort of the most questionable, or sort of the maybe there's better options in play, or made the least favourable option for you?
Yeah, I liked what the Cleveland Browns did last season. They had a good, good season, and one reason was their star linebacker that they drafted last year in Carl Mecklenburg, and now they picked another linebacker who does not seem to be on the same level than Mecklenburg is. So I was surprised that they went with linebacker, and maybe did not get the best one. Gary Reason, 71 overall at pick 15. 77 tackling is good, but other than that, he needs good training camp, a little bit development, also needs to develop his player skill. When we look at his personality rating, he looks good, so maybe there's potential there, but maybe not a starter right away. And especially if we look at players that went in round 3, there was a linebacker that was better than this one in round 1. So linebacker was, maybe not the best pick here for the Browns. Of course, he can develop, but for now, that would be my least favorite pick in round 1.
Yeah, I pretty much agree. In terms of your observations there, I think there's probably better players on the board, but yeah, who knows? In a training camp, he could boost out, and we could see him sort of really mark his status down as being a worthy first round pick there. So my least favourite pick in terms of the first round was going back to the Seahawks, picking up sort of Ricky Sanders in terms of pick 23. I think my main observation here is that, again, similar to you in terms of the observation with the Browns, I think there were probably better options on the board, and probably other receivers that were probably just as good that went in later rounds. So I'm not sure whether that was the right move by the Seahawks to kind of pick him up there. On paper he looks like he's going to be an okay receiver. He's plus 70 in most of the key areas, but I think, again, personality ratings maybe could hold him back a little bit, and he's going to need a really good training camp to kind of come out of that looking like a first round pick, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. So that was maybe a little bit of a reach, especially when we look at the second round. And I will directly dive into my favorite pick here, pick 20, again, Pittsburgh Steelers, Lionel Manuel, wide receiver. He would have been the better option, and getting quality wide receiver 1 round later was not only a good pickup for the Steelers, but also showed that maybe a little bit of a reach for the Seahawks that, of course, needed another playmaker. But the Steelers, man, I really love their draft. They had 5 picks in the first 2 rounds. All of them should be starters, or maybe not their quarterback, Jeff Hostetler, who went 1 pick later. But he's a younger prospect. When we look at the Steelers, we talked about them in one of our podcasts and mentioned that they are an older team and will be interesting to see how they manage the offseason. And man, did they deliver. 5 great picks, and Lionel Manuel, one of my favorite value picks in round 2. Decent speed, decent hands. So the Steelers got young talent again in this draft.
Yeah, well done by the Steelers in terms of those selections. My favourite pick of the second round. It seems like we're looping back here. You're talking about receivers being good, bad. I'm talking about linebackers being good and bad here. I mean, in terms of a comparison for a linebacker, I thought it was a really good selection. Tampa Bay picking up Vaughn Johnson. In terms of pick number 2, sort of pick 10 of the second round, I really like this pickup. I think he's got good overall ability, phenomenal strength. I can see him being a really, really good starter from day one. So I really like that pickup. Again, area maybe that Tampa Bay were kind of looking at in terms of need, and I think he's going to be a really, really good fit. I would actually really like to see him develop as an edge as well. Given his size and weight, I think it'd be a fascinating option there. But yeah, I like the pickup. Yeah, I think when we compare him to your sort of least favorite one in terms of the Browns pickup in the first round, Vaughan Johnson was sitting on the board, who I think is probably a better linebacker of the two.
Yeah, I agree. He's really good. A really good strength, good agility, good tackling, and also decent speed compared to all the other linebackers. No one is really fast, but he looks like the better linebacker so far. And especially if we look 2 picks later, the Detroit Lions, my least favorite pick in the second round, got Steve Hathaway, who is 65 overall and worse in all ratings. And yeah, that was definitely a reach. So not the best linebacker. So maybe that's also why the Lions thought at pick 16 they needed to pick another linebacker. Was then better, 75 overall. But yeah, I wonder if they would have picked Johnny Meats that they got on 16 at 12, and maybe that would have given them the option to pick another player instead of going 2 linebackers. Where yeah, Johnny Means should be a starter, but Steve Hathaway rather a backup player, so he needs good development. But yeah, we're talking a lot about linebackers and wide receivers, but we got some value picks and some reaches, especially for those 2 positions.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it indicates maybe where the position is sort of there is a big gap between the top tier of those skill sets. Top wide receivers are much better than sort of the middle pack of the receivers, and the same with the linebackers. Given how direction of travel has been in terms of performances and teams and things, it's no surprise that we're looking at those 2 position sets. But there is a different position that I want to talk about in terms of my favourite, my least favourite second round pick, which was the Denver Broncos picking up Doug Smith as the pick 2, number 7. I genuinely, this is the one of all of the picks that I thought were least favourable. I don't know if this guy is going to even stay in the league post his end of his contract. I could see him being cut, just given that he is pretty much, his strength is okay for a defensive tackle, but everything else is well below par of what you'd expect for any sort of average player in this league for that position set. So I don't know whether this guy's going to stick around. I think it was a bit of a reach. Again, there was other options on the board. I think they were taken much later in the draft that maybe were more serviceable. So I could well see him being shipped around a little bit and probably eventually cut.
Yeah, defensive tackle, as mentioned earlier, is one of the positions where we saw 3 really good defensive tackles in round 1, with the worst one with an overall rating of 75. And just a few picks later, we got a 63 on defensive tackle. So maybe the Broncos got a little bit surprised with the defensive tackle run that already started at 21 with the Steelers. But yeah, I agree. Some better players on the board, and unfortunately, defensive tackle, one of the positions where we have a few really good players and then a lot of fringe backups, or happy if they get a roster spot for one of these teams.
Yeah, I think so. So let's move on to the third round. So my favourite pick in the third round was actually quite a late pick in terms of coming through here. So I really like the pickup of Doug Dawson from the Bengals. And, you talked about it, Wobbegong, through the beginning of the show, how important it is to get a good offensive line, or to get the lines kind of sorted in terms of performance, to build your team around, essentially. And I really like this pickup late in sort of third round. Again, it's a position where the Bengals were kind of looking for that additional guy in there who can come in and start. And I think, I really liked his strength. I really like his personality ratings. Kind of going to need to get some of that blocking up. I think he's going to be an okay run blocker. The pass blocking might be questionable from day one, but a good training camp behind him could see him become a very solid starter. So picking him up late in the third round, I thought was a really excellent option and a good pick by the Bengals.
Yes, and we talked about top 10 guards, and I think this guard by the Bengals is not too far off. Of course, he's worse, but also we were talking about a top 10 pick earlier for the Chargers, and now we are here at pick 26 in the third round. So decent value for the Bengals. My favorite pick was Harry Hamilton, pick 16 in round 3, and he was projected to be first or second rounder, the best free safety in the draft. And I thought, well, for sure someone will pick him in the second round. If you need a free safety, he's the best one to get. He was also on my board, and he traded out of the second round and took another position, but I was already surprised that he was available end of round 2. So now getting him mid round 3, I think he's a good pickup. Free safety, not the best position here in this particular draft, but incredible work ethic, incredible competitiveness, and also with a training camp, he should be a quality free safety, and very excited to see what he can do for the Oakland Raiders.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Nice little pickup here, given his projection and how he's kind of turned out here. The Raiders are really interesting, and we'll talk about them probably on the AFC preview. But they had a lot of picks, so they brought in a lot of different talent and different skill sets. And Harry Hamilton was one of the positive notes of that, I think. Let's talk about my least favourite pick of the third round. And it was, of course, the Raiders, unfortunately. So talking about some of the things they did well, some of the things that maybe they could have done slightly differently. And that was Andre Waters, who was picked in the third round at the top, as pick number 4. Strong safety. I think that he's probably going to be good enough to stick around. No doubt about that. But his personality ratings are a bit questionable. And when you compare him to some of the other strong safeties who are sitting around on the roster, I think that he's probably going to struggle for game time, which means that his development is probably going to be up and down. And given where his current ratings are, I think that he might end up being a suspect to possibly be moved on. Really, given that the Steelers have Darden, who they got him for another year, who's far above Waters in terms of capability. So, not sure how he fits in terms of roster composition, as well as maybe the talent is going to probably struggle to get the game time that it needs.
Yes, so I agree with that. Maybe also not the best talent available, and I think it's tough to talk about least favorite picks in round 3, since there are some players where you just take a swing on them. Maybe you like a trait, you like their personality, you like something else, or you just pick based on need. And there will always be in the third round players that are maybe not the best ones, and I think that's one reason why we're doing that in game and not as a live draft format. And we have the sleepers, and we won't talk about a specific sleeper here with the picks, but I think round 3 you always get some bad players, and therefore it was tough for me to get one player in here as my least favorite pick. But I think pick 10, New York Jets, David Lewis, tight end, could be one of them. I think they picked based on need. They needed a backup tight end and hope that David Lewis can be that backup tight end. But 61 speed, definitely not good. And we did not talk about the other tight ends in this draft. We already got one at pick 11 in the second round, which could have also been one of my least favorite picks. And maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I think at pick 19, the best tight end in the draft went to the Buffalo Bills with 75 speed. I think the Jets, interesting, or good for them to pick tight end. Maybe they just did not get the right one. Also, when we look at other positions and other needs, they had, you take a swing on a player. Sometimes you hit, sometimes you miss. But also in the fourth round, there were other players that could have been a better selection for the Jets. That was one of the picks they got for the trade. Took a swing, missed, but that's part of the third round.
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, the tight end position was quite weak in this draft as well. And I do agree. I think you managed to get the best of the bad bunch really in this one. But definitely a position set. When I got the scouting back, it was very clear that there wasn't going to be a serviceable tight end really available. Good. no surprise that people taking swings on position sets of that nature. We're going to end up with some dud ones. But that's just the way the draft goes, as you said. When you get to these sort of mid rounds, sometimes you're just taking a position and you're just hoping that a good training camp or a bit of development or starting some games for the team over the next year or two, they develop into a solid starter. So no surprise there. But that brings us to the close in terms of our top sort of couple of rounds. Who we think the sort of the better picks were, the least favourable picks. Any sort of final thoughts and reflections on the draft Wobbegong before we close out the show?
Yeah, we asked everyone to also give input about how they perceive the draft, and we got one input from Jackson, the owner of the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think we have to definitely mention that here. He wrote in what could have go down as one of the most transformative drafts in franchise history, the Kansas City Chiefs walked away from the 1984 RFL Draft with a haul that has fans buzzing. Holding the number 1 overall pick, the Chiefs made the obvious decision, selecting dynamic BYU quarterback Steve Young. Young, a mobile, strong-arm signal caller, is expected to inject new life into a Chiefs offense that lacked the pulse last season. Known for his athleticism and poise under pressure, Young is widely regarded as one of the most complete quarterback prospects in recent memory. We believe Steve can be the cornerstone of our franchise for the next decade. Wasn't much of a decision to be made here, said Chiefs owner Jackson. Kansas City wasn't done after getting their franchise QB at number 1, holding a second first-round pick at number 19. They landed a player many had projected to go in the top 10, offensive tackle John Alt out of Iowa. At 6'8", 298 pounds, Alt brings size, strength, and athleticism to a Kansas City offense line that has last year's first-round pick, Mark Tuinei, on it already and now looks poised to protect its new franchise QB for years to come. The Chiefs flipped the draft strategy going into the second round, where they focused on shoring up the defense. With their first pick in round 2, they selected Jumpy Gathers, the powerful defensive end from Wichita State, known for his raw strength and disruptive play in the trenches. Moments later, Kansas City turned to linebacker and selected Jackie Shipp out of Oklahoma. A versatile tackler, Shipp brings intensity to the middle of the Chiefs' defense. His experience playing in a top-tier college program gives him a strong chance to compete for a starting role right away. With this draft class, Kansas City has clearly signaled a new era of Chiefs football. If these picks live up to their billing, 1984 could be remembered as the draft that changed the fortunes of the Chiefs for years to come. So thanks, Jackson, for sending in your text. We already talked about the number 1 pick, Steve Young, and their second selection in the tackle. What's your view on the Chiefs? Do you think they already have a chance, maybe as a sneak preview to next episode, to give a shot for the playoffs? Do they think with this draft they really have a cornerstone on both offense and defense?
Yeah, thanks Jackson very much for sending stuff in. We always are really grateful when GMs take the time to write stuff or send us comments and views ahead of these episodes, because it really helps us frame our mind in terms of teams and viewpoints and beyond just myself and Wobbegong. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm going to hold some of the preview till next week, for my opinion, is Wobbegong. But I'll give a snippet. I think when I look at the when I particularly look at the AFC West, I think it's one of the most open divisions this year, and that's fantastic for the Chiefs, who've just had a really strong draft. I mean, you mentioned some of those guys there. I think they're in a really good shape to be competitive this year in that division. It's one of these weird ones in terms of the AFC, right? Which is you either have to win your division, which I think for the AFC West is, as I said, is really open. So that's in play. But I don't think an AFC West team that comes second and below is going to sneak into the wildcard slot. I think that'll go to some of the other divisions. But yeah, without giving too much away about the Chiefs and my view on them, I think they're going to be very competitive this year in that division.
Yeah, we will talk about that next week, as said. So will be very interesting to see what they're doing. And besides the Chiefs, I mean, we talked a lot about my favorite drafts. I mentioned the Steelers with 5 quality picks in round 1 and 2. The Bears had 4 first rounders, 3 on the defensive side. So I'm very excited to see what they can build around this team. And yeah, we also already talked about the Bucks and Jets. That would be my teams number 3 and 4 that I really liked during the draft. For the Bucks, it was a good move to trade up for Boomer Esiason and getting your favorite pick in the second round. So definitely a good draft for them. And for the Jets, we already mentioned them. Also a good trade for them, getting great talent, which should be a very, very scary team. But again, we will talk about the Jets and the preview next week. But these would be the teams I really liked in this year's draft.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, we'll be back next week to talk about the AFC and the NFC in probably 2 separate episodes. But the draft is over. Really interesting to see how it played out, and can't wait to see how some of these guys go in terms of training camp and preseason. To see some of these ratings, put numbers up on the board to see whether the our views and opinions really do come out to fruition. But Wobbegong, it's great to have you back, and we'll be back next week, as I said. AFC and NFC previews.
Yes, sounds good. Very exciting. And if anyone has some text or audio files to share, we truly appreciate that, and makes really our podcast better, and getting also your opinions in and your views on your own teams. We can talk a lot, of course, about our teams and our views on our strategies, but always nice to get input. So really looking forward to the season preview episodes next week. See you then.